two have never been intimate with each other yet?
No, she's married. I try not to, do anything like that to sabotage people's marriages because I think it's wrong.
The moment Jasmine walked onto that stage with a full pregnancy belly, the room froze. Gino's face did not move, but something behind his eyes collapsed, like he had been holding a truth he could no longer outrun. The reveal landed harder because everyone remembered the promise, the one Matt made on camera when he looked straight into Gino's face and said he would follow the rules of their new open marriage. Sabrina here with TLC Drama Leave, and if you are watching this, tell me in the comments what you would have done in that moment, because this was the kind of twist that shakes the ground under a relationship. The shock was not only the pregnancy, it was the silence between Gino's breaths. It was the knowledge that this agreement, the one he reluctantly accepted, had turned into something he never emotionally prepared for. He said yes to an open marriage, while his own marriage was already sinking. He agreed out of fear of losing Jasmine, not because he believed it would heal anything. Anyone watching could feel the tension ripple across the stage. You could sense the questions forming before the audience even processed the reveal. If Matt broke the rules once, had he broken them before? If Jasmine already felt insecure, what did this new complication do to the fragile trust holding their marriage together? And if Gino was never comfortable with this setup, why did he stay quiet until everything exploded in public? The emotional stakes grew heavier with every second that passed. Jasmine held her stomach with a strange confidence that did not match the chaos building behind her. Her walk was steady. Her eyes were locked forward. She looked like someone who had already decided she would not shrink, no matter how messy the moment became. Meanwhile, Gino sat with the kind of hurt that builds slowly over months. He had spoken about feeling disconnected. He had mentioned the months without intimacy. Now he was watching the outcome of a decision he made against his own instincts. That gap between what he wanted and what he agreed to made the reveal feel even sharper. There was also the unspoken fear. If this is where the open marriage idea led, what else had happened off camera? If this was the turning point we saw, what turning points were hidden? Something shifted in the room when Gino finally looked away from Jasmine. And that shift is the moment I want you to hold on to, because everything that follows grows from that silence. The pregnancy reveal did not start the chaos. It exposed the chaos that had been growing in quiet corners long before they reached the tell-all. The lie about protection, the interview with Matt, the pressure Jasmine felt, the fear Gino carried, none of that was resolved. None of it was even close to being understood. And the moment Jasmine stepped onto that stage, every buried issue rose to the surface. What the audience did not know yet was this reveal was only the first shock. Something much earlier had set all of this in motion, and once we trace that moment back, the entire story looks different. Before the pregnancy shock, before the tell-all stage tension, the entire mess started with a proposal that never felt natural for either of them. Jasmine brought up the open marriage during a stretch when she felt unwanted and ignored. She described 9 months without intimacy as if it proved something final about their marriage. Gino heard the frustration and guilt took over. He did not push back because he feared the next step would be her walking away. The emotional gap between them had grown so wide that the idea of sharing each other with someone else felt easier than facing the silence sitting in their own home. That silence held more weight than anyone admitted. Jasmine framed the lack of intimacy as proof she was no longer desired. Gino framed it as emotional exhaustion from the non-stop fighting. Both were hurting, but neither said the simple truth. They were not connecting because they no longer felt safe with each other. Instead of rebuilding trust, they chose a shortcut that created even more pressure. When Jasmine pushed for an open marriage, it felt less like a choice and more like a warning. Gino knew the tone. He knew she was halfway out the door if he refused. So he agreed, not with confidence, but with the kind of voice people use when they try to protect something already slipping through their fingers. Everything got stranger when the cameras caught the interview with Matt. Gino sat stiff, like a man preparing for a job interview he never applied for. Matt sat there trying to look casual, but the energy was off from the first hello. The questions were basic, but they carried weight. How did they meet? Would he follow the rules? Would he respect boundaries? Matt said yes to everything, but the smile on his face during the condom moment was loud. Viewers noticed it. Gino noticed it. Even Jasmine noticed it, but she pushed forward as if the smallest doubts were too inconvenient to deal with. The whole scene looked like two worlds rubbing against each other with no shared understanding. Gino approached the situation like a rule book. Jasmine approached it like an escape hatch. Matt approached it like he had nothing to lose. The mismatch was obvious. They were not three people on the same plan. They were three people trying to soothe three different emotional wounds, and nothing about it was sustainable. This is where the tension started to thicken, because the cracks were already visible before anyone crossed a line, yet no one said a word about stopping the train before it went off the tracks. Each person walked into that agreement with a different definition of loyalty, a different definition of respect, a different definition of connection. And Gino, who looked the most uncomfortable from day one, kept swallowing his doubts. He told himself he could handle it, but every moment revealed something new he was not ready for. The question that still lingers is simple. If he saw the boundaries slipping this early, why did he stay silent when he knew the agreement was never built for the pressure that was coming next? The moment Matt smiled through that condom promise, the entire agreement lost its structure. He nodded with confidence, but the smirk told a different story. It was the kind of expression people give when they want you to believe they understand the rules, even though they have no intention of following them. Gino watched that expression and tried to pretend he did not see what everyone else saw. His eyes dropped. His body stiffened. His voice thinned out. He looked like someone who had agreed to a deal he no longer trusted. The audience reacted fast because the behavior was clear. Matt delivered the promise with the enthusiasm of someone giving a fake yes in a group project. His tone was friendly, but the vibe was dismissive. It felt like he was humoring Gino, not respecting the boundary. People watching at home sensed it before the cast even responded. Viewers felt the shift. They saw how much weight Gino put into that one rule. They saw how hard he clung to it because it was the only part of the open marriage that made him feel protected. So when Matt brushed past the seriousness of that moment, the betrayal felt bigger. Gino did not react in the moment. He froze. Silence was his shield. But the hurt showed through his expression. He had agreed to an open marriage to keep Jasmine close, not because he felt secure. So every time the rules wobbled, his fear doubled. He was not worried about the physical act. He was worried about what the act symbolized. A broken rule meant a broken bond, and deep down he already knew that their bond was fragile. Jasmine's response made the situation even more complicated. She treated the rule like a formality, not a boundary. When things started slipping, she acted like the rules themselves were the problem, not the behavior. She tried to hold on to the emotional high of feeling wanted again. Her reactions shifted between defensiveness and frustration, and whenever someone questioned the setup, she returned to the same point. She felt ignored for months, and now she wanted control over her happiness. Control became the goal, not connection. The tension grew as soon as the first rule fell apart. There was a distance between Jasmine and Gino that widened with every small violation. She focused on her own needs, and he focused on survival. The cracks between them became part of every conversation, every glance, every argument. Matt seemed comfortable carrying the lighter version of Jasmine, the version that did not argue or express insecurity. Gino carried the weight of the full picture, and the imbalance made everything feel unfair. This is the moment where the air in the room changed, because the issue stopped being about rules and started being about what happens when someone begins to catch feelings inside an agreement. That was only meant to patch a broken marriage. Everyone kept pretending the situation could stay casual, but the emotional shift was already in motion, and the next reveal showed how much deeper the problem ran once feelings began entering the mix. Jealousy hit Gino in slow waves. Not loud at first, but steady enough to change how he looked at everything around him. He tried to act calm when Matt entered the picture, but the truth slipped out later when he admitted he wanted to hit him. He said it in a flat voice, not with rage, but with the exhaustion of someone pushed past his limits. It was a reaction built on fear, not confidence. Fear of losing Jasmine, fear of being replaced, fear of agreeing to something he never wanted and then watching it unfold faster than he could process. That same fear spilled into the moment with Florian. The argument was sharp, fast, and pointed in the wrong direction. Florian pushed him, and Gino snapped at the first sign of pressure. He defended himself with frustration he had been storing for months. Florian challenged his choices, and instead of directing the anger toward the situation that caused the pain, Gino lashed out at the closest voice in the room. It was misdirected anger, but it showed how overwhelmed he had become. He did not know where to place his emotions. He only knew he was drowning in them. Jasmine carried her own insecurity, and her reactions often changed the dynamic. When the tears arrived, the energy shifted instantly. She cried with intensity, like every emotion in her body needed out all at once. Her tears softened the room, but they also created an imbalance. Gino always folded when she cried. His tone dropped. His voice softened. He backed down before he could express what he truly felt. Her tears were real, but they also held power. They paused arguments. They shifted blame. They forced Gino to comfort her instead of expressing his own pain. He kept hiding behind silence because he wanted to keep the peace. She kept expressing everything because she wanted to feel heard. Both wanted safety, but they used opposite methods to find it. He avoided conflict to protect the relationship. She pushed conflict to fix it. Their approaches were built from insecurity, not partnership. The emotional labor tilted in one direction. Gino held back to avoid upsetting her. Jasmine pushed forward because she did not want to feel unwanted again. The more he suppressed, the more she escalated. They circled each other without touching the real issue. Their communication started to look like two people fighting shadows instead of solving the wound beneath it. Gino blamed the open marriage for his stress, but the stress existed long before the agreement. Jasmine blamed the lack of intimacy for her insecurity, but the insecurity existed long before the 9 months she talked about. The root cause was never the rule or the drought. It was the lack of trust sitting at the center of every decision. The pressure kept building because both tried to repair the surface while ignoring the truth under it. And the moment that truth finally broke through, changed the direction of their entire story. The therapy room looked calm, but none of the conversations touched the real wound beneath Gino and Jasmine's marriage. The professionals focused on surface fixes, small exercises, and gentle guidance, but the core issue never came out with full honesty. They talked about communication, boundaries, and trust, but no one pressed on the truth both of them were scared to admit. They were not struggling because of an open marriage. They were struggling because the open marriage was an attempt to avoid dealing with everything that came before it. The setting looked supportive, yet every session felt like it skimmed around the edge of the problem without ever breaking through. The other couples saw the danger faster than any therapist. They listened to Jasmine call the 9 months without intimacy an emergency and watched Gino shrink in guilt. They heard the timeline, the frustration, and the context, and many of them reacted instantly. Rob pointed out the obvious. Jasmine had reframed the entire situation as if the open marriage would help Gino, when in reality she wanted more access to Matt. He voiced what viewers were saying at home. She had already formed a connection with someone else before presenting the open marriage idea, and now she was packaging it as a solution instead of an escape route. The other couples shook their heads because they could see what Gino refused to say. This was not a plan. This was a crisis in disguise. The 9-month drought became a pressure point for Jasmine because she attached her identity to it. To her, the gap meant rejection. It meant losing her place in the marriage. She repeated the timeline with intensity because she wanted everyone to understand how heavy it felt for her. But the drought was not the only missing piece. The emotional distance, the repeated fights, the insecurity bubbling under every interaction, all of it added to the weight she carried. The 9 months were a symptom, not the disease, but she used the number like a badge of suffering that allowed her decisions to feel justified. Gino looked smaller every time the topic came up. He explained the lack of intimacy as emotional disconnect, not disinterest. He tried to say he was overwhelmed. He tried to say he had been hurt by the constant arguments. But whenever he spoke, he softened his tone to avoid upsetting Jasmine. The ceremony required both of them to stand in front of each other and make a final decision. They smiled for the cameras. They promised to reconnect. They agreed to cancel the open marriage. And on the surface, it looked like a turning point, a hopeful moment, a chance to reset everything before returning home. But the room never felt secure. Their voices sounded shaky. Their smiles looked painted on. The ceremony solved nothing, because nothing had been confronted. They recommitted without repairing. They promised without processing. They moved forward without clearing the past. So the moment they held hands and stepped away from the ceremony, the tension followed them like a shadow. Both of them carried a secret pressure into the finale, something neither was ready to say out loud. And once that pressure surfaced, the entire story shifted into a direction no one on that island predicted. When Jasmine stepped onto the tell-all stage with her pregnancy showing, the room dropped into complete silence. Gino's eyes locked onto her stomach first, then her face, then the floor. His expression did not explode. It collapsed inward, slow and heavy, like he was trying to keep himself from breaking in front of a crowd. The audience gasped before anyone spoke. Even the cast, who had been through their own storms, stared in shock. The energy shifted fast, and every camera angle caught the moment Gino realized the truth he had been running from had finally cornered him. Jasmine held herself with a confidence that felt impossible for the situation she stepped into. Her shoulders were back. Her steps were steady. She looked like someone who had practiced walking into the fire without flinching. She did not hide her stomach. She did not look apologetic. She stood there as if she had already accepted everything that would come next. That confidence confused people because it clashed with the chaos surrounding her. This was the same woman who cried during the retreat, the same woman who said she felt unwanted, the same woman who said 9 months of distance had crushed her self-esteem. Yet here she was, steady and bold. The tension pulled tighter when the camera cut to Gino again. His jaw clenched, his hands folded awkwardly, his breathing shifted. He was not angry. He was not shocked. He was ashamed. The shame came from the public exposure of a private failure. The world now saw the result of a decision he never wanted, made from fear instead of strength. He had agreed to an open marriage to keep her close, but now the outcome of that agreement stood inches from him. The stage turned into a mirror he could not look away from. The power dynamic flipped instantly. Jasmine, who often felt insecure, now held the narrative without saying a word. Gino, who tried to maintain some control through rules and boundaries, lost all of it in the span of a few steps. The cast watched him with a mix of empathy and disbelief. Some felt bad, others felt validated, because they warned him again and again that the setup would crumble. The reveal was not only about pregnancy, it symbolized everything they ignored, the cracks they denied, the choices they made out of fear. It showed the emotional distance between them in one single moment. Public humiliation is a different kind of pain. It takes something private and turns it into a spotlight. In that room, Gino was not only facing Jasmine, he was facing the reactions of every person watching. Every whisper, every widened eye, every quiet exhale. Jasmine's confidence made the moment even sharper, because it suggested she no longer feared judgment. She had reached a point where survival mattered more than perception. Gino had reached the opposite point. He cared deeply about perception and now had no control over it. The emotional pressure grew with every second they stood together on that stage. There was no space to hide, no time to think, no moment to breathe. The cliffhanger was not the pregnancy itself. It was the silence between them. It was the question hanging in the air. What did this reveal expose about their marriage that no one had said out loud yet? What part of their story was still hidden beneath the surface, waiting to break open next? When the stage lights softened and the shock loosened its grip, the truth of this entire journey settled into something quieter. The story was never only about an open marriage or a broken promise. It was about the way two people kept abandoning themselves to hold on to each other. Jasmine fought her insecurity by reaching for connection anywhere she could find it. Gino fought his fear by agreeing to things that chipped away at his own sense of stability. Both kept choosing short-term relief instead of long-term honesty, and every time they tried to fix one crack, another one opened somewhere else. Boundaries were mentioned often, but they were never protected. Each one of them crossed their own line long before anyone else crossed it for them. Jasmine ignored her inner warning that she was still reacting from past hurt. Gino ignored his discomfort because silence felt safer than conflict. Their relationship became a cycle, not because they wanted chaos, but because they wanted reassurance without doing the emotional work that real reassurance requires. They kept repeating the same pattern because it felt familiar. Insecurity can feel like truth when it goes unchecked for too long. Avoidance can feel like peace when confrontation scares you. Together, they created a dynamic where no one felt secure, yet neither was willing to let go. Watching them, you can see how both of them reached this breaking point. Jasmine longed for closeness and validation. Gino longed for calm and certainty. Those needs clashed at every turn. Her fear made her push harder. His fear made him pull back. They tried to stay together while moving in opposite emotional directions. So the open marriage was never the cause of their collapse. It was the consequence of every unresolved moment that came before it. Their choices were driven by panic, not clarity, and panic rarely creates anything stable. There is a lesson in this for anyone who has ever stayed silent to avoid losing someone. When you shrink yourself to keep the peace does not last. When you chase reassurance in the wrong places, the reassurance never sticks. When you pretend everything is fine, the truth waits until it can no longer be ignored. The tell-all reveal was simply the moment their truth caught up with them. A relationship built on fear will always break in public the same way it breaks in private. Slowly at first, then all at once. As the cameras wrapped and the noise faded, the quiet between Jasmine and Gino said more than any argument they ever had on screen. It raised a question no one answered that night. If this is where the open marriage led, and if this is what their silence created, what happens next when both are forced to face the future without any illusions left to hide behind? There is one more twist to this story that did not make it to the tell-all stage, and it changes how you understand everything they went through. The next chapter reveals the part no one talked about, and it shifts the entire timeline of their decisions.